What's up, everyone? We're live tonight with Miles from Cold Blooded Connoisseur. How are you doing tonight? Are you able to hear me?
Are you asking me?
Yep.
I'm doing really good. How's everybody doing?
So, how did your reptile journey begin?
So my reptile journey began when I was like 5. I was the kid in the neighborhood that was afraid of lizards. So I actually had a couple friends that were older neighborhood friends, and they'd always go catching just the local bluebellies. And I'd go with them, and I'd always be like made fun of because I was like literally afraid to touch them. They'd squirm a little bit, and I'd freak out. And the oldest of the group had a leopard gecko that he didn't really care for it that much. That was like super friendly. So he gave it to me to help conquer my fear of lizards and reptiles. And I had a leopard gecko from 5. I actually snuck it in my dorm. I had it for 20 years before it passed away. And I don't know how old it was before I got it. But that kind of got things rolling. And then by the time I was like 10, I was like interested in getting just about anything. But my parents really like to travel, so they were really hesitant on letting me get anything for a while, until finally I was able to get a bearded dragon. And then when I was 13, I was able to I like discovered chameleons. That was like the first big thing that got me like opened up my horizon to things beyond what you see at just like a normal pet store.
Yeah.
Got into panther chameleons, but part of why I was able to do that is a friend of mine found one, showed it to me, and I showed it to my dad, and he went from not really being supportive or fond of having reptiles to like, oh my god, we gotta have one of those. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Uh, so that kind of was the catapult. Also, backtracking a little bit, also a little bit after being 5 in like first grade, so like 6 to 6.5. Turns out my kindergarten, first grade, like principal had 2 blue tongue skinks as pets, and brought them to show and tell for us one time. So there was like a desire for blue tongues as well. Like I really, really liked them at a young age, but I had no idea where to get them. And it kind of faded. But after I had started working with chameleons at 13, all through high school with my parents' support, I think at 15 I hatched my first ones. And then just kind of went from there. I left for college and I had to kind of take a pause. So I had a friend out locally that kind of took over my breeding projects, left. And then in my second year, I only lived on campus for a year. So as soon as I secured a spot in a house, I like worked a deal out with my roommates where my portion of rent was my room plus the garage.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got that locked down, started rolling back into it. And I got like Brian Barczyk's video, his first one, bringing out and introducing blue tongues to people was like a big reminder of like, oh my god, I forgot all about these things. Like this was one of the coolest memories of when I was a kid with reptiles. So I was working with chameleons, and that's when I decided to take the plunge on skinks. And at first, I just started buying like literally every single thing that I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
Which, looking back, was a little bit of a mistake. There's a lot of stuff that I kept and raised and spent 2+ years on that I never even put into a project, just because I didn't really start with any specific vision. But since then, I've kind of like worked into the directions I want to go. Still working with Turner White stuff a lot. That's one of like my foundation points, but I want to see what happens bringing that into red projects. But everything else is reds, and then dabble in with the morphs. That's kind of taken us to where we are today. Is a lot of focus on skinks, and then still haven't gotten away from chameleons. I tried leaving, stopped, like I wasn't working with chameleons for a little bit, just so I could put all of my focus and attention on skinks, and I don't know what exactly brings me back, but the two of them, I don't see myself being able to work in the reptile world without having both of them around.
Well, and the chameleons you got are gorgeous. Going back to when you were younger, how hard was it hatching them when you were 15?
I had one group hatch out and like 7 or 8 just completely fail. And then I kind of sort of got it figured out right when I was getting ready to leave for school. So I just kind of passed that on to the buddy of mine how I did it. But yeah, there was a lot of misinformation at that time, and some of the big names. I don't want to bash anybody, but there's a 13-year-old kid that thought I had mentors in the chameleon world, but were just kind of just selling me garbage and telling me the wrong things. And one of them is actually still around. He's a big guy that sells eggs. So I don't know if anybody in the chameleon world knows that there's it's a pretty polarizing concept. People selling the eggs, since they're free floating for like the first 2 months. So if they roll around, the embryo doesn't attach, kind of like a chicken egg.
Yeah, I always thought that was
They
kind of weird.
won't get. So if you move them or roll them or anything in the first stage of incubation, it's totally fine until after around 2 months it sets. And then you treat them just like you would most reptile eggs. But so there is, in theory, the ability to ship them and they'll be fine. But people that buy an egg don't know how to take care of a 1-day-old chameleon. So it's, the ethics of it are not there in my mind. But
well, and
anyway.
Some are a lot easier to establish when they're younger too. Like, baby blue tongues are not too bad compared to, chameleons. If you don't know what you're doing, they got a lot harder requirements.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, I haven't cracked the code completely. Like, I'll have a batch of chameleons and it's 100%, every single one of them is totally healthy, make it to term and end up being able to sell them to customers or keep them. Or I'll have a group where 25% survive and 75 don't. And I think a lot has to do with the nutrients and the development of the eggs while they're still moms grab it. That's a big thing. Also, parasites run rampant in chameleons. Like, a lot of people don't realize, because if you give them proper husbandry, they have really good immune systems and will fight it off. But as soon as you're not doing things right, it can go downhill really fast. But a lot of stuff that comes from bugs, that comes from different things, there's like multiple strains of coccidia, as well as like pinworms and roundworms. There's one strain that can actually pass on to the eggshell, so they can hatch and get it, because it can survive a year without a host.
So how do you prevent that?
You gotta get a microscope. I'm just now learning how to do this. You gotta get a microscope and just do your own fecals. You gotta be doing that with all your animals and just really keeping on top of it, and learn how to be your own vet with them, honestly, if you're breeding.
Now, do you breed any of your own insects to try to prevent some of that? Like, or is it?
I have been starting to. So I have dubia colonies, but like, honestly, I think more dubia go to skinks as like enrichment items than they do go to the chameleons, because so many of them just won't eat them. They're just not interested for whatever reason. They won't eat them in a cup generally, or they're just They'll maybe eat them if you get them climbing on the wall, but the dubia are going straight to the floor and trying to hide. So they're really difficult to use consistently, especially the number of chameleons I've got. If you tongue feed and individually and like kind of bait them into it, it'll kind of do its job. You can get a lot more of them too, but when you have to feed large numbers, it's difficult. But I have been dabbling with breeding crickets, and it is awful. It's absolutely terrible. They smell. They just, you do one thing wrong, you kill a whole batch of them, all sorts of stuff. But even just I've gotten to a point where I'm pretty good at getting them to hatch. So even just getting them started off with clean bugs early when their immune system hasn't really developed, I've seen that help a lot.
Now, what about like worms or stuff, or same concept? You know, them sitting in a cup, they won't really eat them.
I buy silkworm eggs. I hatch them out and I raise them. There's a few mulberry trees that I poach in the neighborhood, poach leaves off of in the neighborhood, and I'll raise those. I'll offer those to everybody to skink. Some of them will go after it. Some of the chameleon, or all of the chameleons love them. I have super worms. I don't think they're as good of a feeder option, so I haven't tried breeding those, even though they're supposed to be pretty easy.
So, you know the horned lizards that eat ants. They have like the systems where the ants crawl up on the stick in the middle, and then they'll eat them off that. What if you did something like that for dubia, where you had essentially something in the middle for them to climb up on, and then a cup around it, so there's some movement maybe?
That might be worth giving it a shot, for sure.
I mean, worst case, you make a prototype and it don't work, you say screw it.
I definitely need to revisit options. Is a great way to do it, but I definitely need to revisit the dubia approach as like a major part of their diet. It's just been time consuming, and crickets are easy. Like when feeding crickets is easy. I shouldn't say keeping crickets or anything, but feeding crickets when you've got a lot of young ones and just got to go cage to cage. Because I'm also working. It used to be commonplace to house chameleons like communally when you're growing them up. Like everybody would do like a tub with 10, 15, like they split the clutch of eggs or hatchlings into like 2 or 3 tubs, and as they grow, they lower the groups to smaller and smaller. I'm going towards keeping them individually, just like the skinks. So at any given time, there can be like 100 cages I gotta feed. So there's definitely a lot of things that I gotta look into to try and make things easier on me. That's what I'm learning. That would definitely be one.
Yeah, because it might take you some time to make it, but if it would work. Otherwise, another option, you could try breeding grasshoppers.
I'm working on that. I forgot about that.
Okay.
So I had a little bit of a hiccup. I found out that some of the grasshoppers that I was buying from a grasshopper vendor may or may not be legal, but it's like a really prolific species. So the ones that I was cultivating, I don't really want to dabble with potentially having an issue. So I'm working on sourcing a different species that like is allowed.
Yeah.
I think it's Feed Your Chameleon. Dean Missimer has a couple different species that are allowed in California and allowed to cross state lines. So if I get those, I might dabble with it. But again, grasshoppers, the inconsistency with them producing, because they take a long time to hatch, and how fast they grow. So it's like getting really hard to keep enough of every size to satisfy everything. But they're definitely a help, and they've been a lifesaver for wild-caught imports. So sometimes you get a wild-caught in that does not want to have anything to do with any of the feeder insects that we have available.
Yeah.
Because just about every feeder outside of maybe a silkworm and a hornworm are they're nocturnal. So they're not something that a diurnal reptile is ever going to encounter in the wild. So they sometimes don't even notice them as a food option.
Now, do you have enough room where you could set up multiple like stages of grasshoppers to breed, or that would you'd have to like take over your office?
I mean, potentially, if I can get, because like that's another thing is I feel like there's not a lot of information out there on successfully breeding grasshoppers and how to do it. So I've been working on it. If I start getting them to hatch, I've gone as far as I've got seen mating. I've seen their eggs get laid into bins of like sandy dirt that I've got in their enclosures.
Yeah.
If I get to the point where I've hatched them and then fine tuning some things, can get them to hatch just on the proper cycle with one generation. If I get that and I think it's working, then I would say I could build some space or repurpose some space for it. But while I'm kind of just trying to figure it out, I think my space is too much of a scarce resource, an important resource for other stuff.
Yeah.
To dedicate it to that just while it's at this stage.
So there's a guy that's Kai, and I'm drawing a blank on his last name, and after this I'll find the podcast to share for you. He's in California and he breeds whatever kind that's legal.
He's somebody that I work with.
Okay.
I've been getting stuff from Kai, I think Pan or PHAN fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's been my source recently. But yeah, it's just breeding of a different animal. But
we
there.
We talked some on it, but yeah, I think that with maybe some other options, would be worth it. If you could get that, like you said, the concept going, then you could repurpose space.
Definitely. Yeah, it's definitely one of the many things I want to do. So, man, there's every time a project gets completed, there's like 5 more that are on the back burner that are like itching to do, but gotta take things one step at a time.
Yeah, that's all you can do, and mark it off the list and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, how did your skink breeding season go so far this year?
So I'm at 67 babies through 9 litters, and I've had 2 slug out, and the other 9 have produced for me so far. I'm waiting on. I bred 47 girls this year, so I'm still waiting on finding the outcome for a lot of stuff. I did things pretty significantly different this year too, so I'm curious to see when it's all said and done how much better, because I don't want to jinx it, but based on the start, it's like way better than I've ever had. Like I'm getting the babies are, a lot of the babies are bigger, not necessarily larger litters, but like I was having issues the last 2 years with some bigger litters that all the babies were really small and needed like assist feeding. Some of them didn't make it out, like almost like they're premature. But I'm not sure what the cause of that was, or if it has to do with any changes that were made. But the biggest thing so far that I did is I did not really cool my animals that much. It screwed me over for Easterns. I didn't really get any action, or I don't think I'm going to produce a single Eastern. I still haven't. But part of that's been I haven't yet been able to. This will be the first year that I'm able to dedicate a separate space to brewmate Easterns at a colder temperature. But what happened this year was completely accidental. Is I had a project to have like a extra like shed building space built when I moved into this new place, so that when the winter got too cold, I could move chameleons that I keep outdoors like 3/4 of the year that are outside 9 months out of the year. They're outside 24/7.
Yeah.
Another month they're outside. Maybe a month and a half they're outside daytime, inside nighttime, and then there's about a month and a half where they're just inside for the full 6 weeks or so completely, because it's just not getting warm enough during the day to so I didn't have that additional space. So this year, even though I cut the heat the same way I had always done for the skinks, slowly get it turned down all the way to off, kind of let the cold weather and climate cool my room down. Some nights as low as in the 40s, but a lot of nights it's in the 50s. This year, during that coldest time, I had to bring the chameleons in, and I had heat lamps and lights on all those, and they're in the same space as the skinks. So the skinks were getting so not as much light, so they were getting a bit more of a photo period than they're used to.
Yeah.
And they were getting a little bit warmer because the ambient of the room was raising from heat lamps and UV bulbs that were going with all the chameleons. So I would say so I was still getting a pretty good nighttime drop, but I would say that like the daytimes would hit mid to high 70s throughout brumation because I had to do that.
So personally, I think you should have a good year based, on that alone. Like, I've noticed some will do that, like colder in the 50s, and I've always had better luck in the upper 60s, lower 70s.
Yeah, during the daytime, that's always been what I've shot for. Low 70s, high 60s, and then there'd be a nighttime drop that would just be kind of whatever happened from the elements outside with the windows open and being in a garage that's not fully insulated. But yeah, I'd say it's just a little bit. I feel like it's just a little bit higher than that. And the second thing is James Fenn like swears by this that he's been doing the last few years and told me to do, and I've just listened to him to a T, is move all my females to their own racks, gradually turn on the heat on the females as we cycle in. Don't turn on any of the males. No heat, no warming up the males. When the females are ready, the males will still kind of started to like wander their cage and look around. The only heat they got was a heat lamp basking bulb over the bins when they were paired.
Okay.
So when they were paired, 75-watt heat bulb over them would be a slow process. Every pairing would almost be 30 minutes to an hour. In the past, I've had some where as soon as you put them together, the male starts going to work. This year, it was like that never happened. It was always like a gradual move. But I had the easiest time with so many different males that were always hit or miss. Would just, as soon as they warm up from the heat lamp, would start making moves if the female was ready, and then would take them off the heat. They wouldn't go to heat, and until I couldn't get females paired anymore, like they weren't showing any interest or I missed their window, I just kept that going. I didn't raise the males heat until the season was done.
So probably about a month, do you think you had them cooler?
About a month, yeah.
So
maybe 5 weeks. Probably closer to 5 weeks.
Well, and that would make sense. So this year I had a little colder nighttime as I was breeding, and I I keep everything a little cooler as I'm breeding. And it does seem like some males will extend their period some when they're cooler.
Yeah, I think it might be extending it, and also I don't know if it has also seemed to help with lining up their window. I feel like I had issues in the past where when the females were ready and like lifting their tail at the presence of a male or their scent, the males didn't want to do anything. By the time the males wanted to do stuff and they went through their shed and they were all about it, like girls just did not want to have them around and would like try and bite them. And this is ones that hadn't even been paired, because I've noticed now that a lot of my stuff doing it this method this year was a one and done. They bred one lock. A couple of days later, they would not let a male near them. So I'm like, okay, that's probably a good sign. Some of them would let multiple, and I'm gonna try and track as much as I could. I was just busy trying to pair as much as I could, but I did take some records on which ones only paired once due to the female, or which ones only paired once because the male stopped showing interest. So I can kind of see if multiple pairings seem to have a better success rate. I want to start doing that over the next few years, see if it has any effect, at least personally.
I'd be curious to see also like the females that only took one lock, since you're starting them first, they're maybe slightly further along in the cycle, so they only need that one to, get the follicles to big enough size to ovulate or whatever.
Yeah.
Just something to keep in the back of your mind, over the, few years to see, like, maybe that is, and sounds like so far so good too, with a bit on the way. So
yeah, no, it's definitely going good. I mean, I'm already close to hitting the, like, I think I barely pushed over 100 babies last season, so I'm on the right track to do a lot more than last year. But we'll just have to wait and see.
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely going good. The only thing that hasn't done me all that great so far is not hitting the odds on ivory to het pairings.
a lot of not visuals.
I've got like a one litter had one visual out of 9 babies. The other litter had 3 out of 14. So I mean, it is what it is. Maybe the next one will even it out for me. But it's
That one's kind of hard. There's not a whole lot you could do on it either.
no. It's, I mean, I'm just happy I got healthy babies, but at this stage, I don't. I nobody seems to want hets. Like, even though like I'm hoping that I can start to prove that there's some cool stuff, because I have heads from so many different lines. Just because a friend of mine that I acquired them from had an ivory that came in from Canada.
Yeah,
It's unrelated to it came at a different time. I mean, it might be related distantly, or it is distantly, but came in separate from what everybody else has been getting. And he was the only one that got a male. There were 4 that came in from that group from the urban reptile.
do you remember when that was?
2020 or
Okay.
2019. Far Out Exotics. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yep.
They have the 2 of the other 3 from that group. It's like on his, like the one that's on his logo with his hypermelanistic that he got from the same import from Canada.
Yeah, Victor.
So there is one male that I have now that he threw it to anything he could get his hands on just to try and make an army of hets before the Reptiles by Mac, I believe, is where the other ones came from.
Yep.
So before they went public with them, and he was trying to kind of do what they did, but just was way behind. And there's some really cool looking offspring from pairing an ivory to red lines, from pairing it to a classic to different stuff. Everything looks different, and it looks like the ivory is like in the het form is influencing it.
So, have you noticed any that appear oddly darker?
The visuals or the het?
The hets.
Like darker than you would expect a normal one to look.
Yeah.
Not particularly, no. They're
All
all
right.
kind of have like a creamier color to it.
So the reason I ask, I have one on loan here, unrelated to that and the other ones. This one, he had 8 or 10 years in the States and never got babies. I bred him this year and got babies. And what I'm assuming would be possibly het hypers also.
Oh, interesting.
Because they're significantly darker than I would expect the normal visuals. Like when you compare the babies, and I could send you pictures later. I'm using my phone as a camera, but some are a lot lighter. That makes sense. And the male was the dad, the red dad I have that produced the hopefully genetic hypo I got, or the AML or whatever it is. So that's in mix. So that might be lighting it, but there's definitely some lighter, some a bit darker. Where it.
So the mom's a visual, you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That would be interesting to see, because I also. And is that? Do you know who has that? Has that on loan from you, or you have from?
So it's John got it. Felicetti.
Was it the guy in Florida that had the? Because there was a guy in Florida that had a fourth one from the group that I got. That Far Out Exotics has.
Yeah, no, he got his in 2014 or 2016.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's way back.
Yeah. Did the fourth person have something odd pop out?
No, but what I was gonna get at is if that happened to be that person's, I would be more interested. So I don't know. I don't know what the variability is supposed to look like in ivory offspring. I should start taking pictures of them because they don't look white when they're born. But I have a couple that look very much different than the other visuals, because I'm up to 15 visuals right now, and I have 4 that look quite a bit different than the 11. And they came from the male that I've got that was from Canada, bred 2 hets that were from James Fenn and from myself, or that I also from my own het that were from the Reptiles by Mac line. But a couple of the hets that were mixing Reptiles by Mac's animal stock and the stock that came from Hong Kong through Canada,
Yep.
has 4 of those look noticeably different.
In which regards? Color, patterns?
They're less white, and they have more solid striping rather than like this like fleckered white with like that kind of beige-ish color that they start at that slowly fades out. I should have taken some pictures so I could upload them. I could show you later, like the comparison I'm talking about. It could very well be just variability within them, but I do kind of think that there's a possibility as we play around with this, like what you're saying, a lot of the stuff that went to Hong Kong, while it was visual for one gene, came from multi-gene pairings.
Yep.
So there's a there's an off chance of the right combo, one of the other genes that is is hiding around. It's got to be in at least one animal.
There was another one in Canada that I believe was anery popped out. So it does happen, and this will kind of well might as well I'll ask. Do you think the ivories are pure northern, or do they have eastern influence?
I think they've got Eastern influence, partially because of what I'm had to say is I don't think when they were being bred, when they were being bred in Australia at first as northerns, I don't know if enough of them were being produced to be selling to the public for getting out of Australia at that time. By the time that there were enough that buyers could get them in Australia and find their way to get them out of Australia, they probably were mixed. And on top of that, it brings the point that there's a possibility that some of these have other genes in them, like you're saying with the anery. But I also would say that if I'm wrong about there being some potential visual het component to the ivory, then the only other thing that would make sense to what I'm kind of seeing the offness and difference of the hets from any kind of normal classic would be influenced from something like an Eastern. So either yes or not sure because maybe there's a visual component, but probably yes.
Well, and if mine proves out to be hyper, it had to come from eastern at some point.
No,
Most likely, at least. I'm sure hyper can happen in the northerns, but since there hasn't been one, odds are would point to eastern.
but I would imagine if we can fact check the anery coming from one, I would imagine any ivory that had the anery pop out would have Eastern in it. And like you're saying, anything that if it pops out another gene is much more likely that it was bred to a multi-gene animal in Australia somewhere down the line than it just reappearing in northern Florida.
I believe it was either 2010 or 2014. Roger started mixing the hyper to the white northern to make double heads for making moon glows and stuff. So that they've been mixed for a lot of years already, and I know Joe Ball was mixing um, multi-gene stuff early on, over 10 years ago. So it might.
Is hyper and ivory, or they call it the super hypo. That's what makes the platinum, right?
Yeah.
When they're double visual.
Yeah.
You know when the first one of those was made? Because as soon as those were made, I feel like anything
that was 14, I think.
14.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I wish we knew when things got in, when founding stock came into the states. These different lines of white, but I would imagine a lot of stuff that was sold as a white northern once they started getting numbers was possible hets or hets like when they were breeding stuff to produce 2-gene animals. Single gene and ivory that wasn't a guaranteed het for something else was probably just sold as ivory or sold as a super hypo.
Yeah, when
I selling them as possible hets, or if they are, people that are getting them cheaper because they're possible het are getting them just for the look at that point.
Yeah, there's not a huge market for hets, it sounds like there. Some people will get them as for breeding. So it would make sense that, that 50% het chance they're not really getting much for, so they just market it as, visual. white northern or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah. But and then that would explain, like we were saying, that there are people with licenses buying 100 at a time, or back in the day buying however many at a time. And if they were only focused on what it had visually, and the cheapest option to get it visually was one that was just that or possible het for other stuff, they're just grabbing them all. Yeah, there's definitely a chance that that's kind of seeded through the Asian markets and wherever else they've gone to.
So, of the other visuals you have, though, you didn't have any luck with the albinos or hypers this year yet?
I've had zero luck with them at all. It sucks. 2 seasons ago, I had a het hyper to the hyper pairing, and I got 2 stillborns, and neither one of them were visuals. I didn't even prove the het, even though it's pretty obvious with the way it looks. You never know. But then the last 2 seasons, after the nothing, no pair. It wouldn't even let a male pair this year. Last year, I paired her to a northern, just because at that stage all of my hypers have developed to some degree that cloudy eye syndrome, that virus, and
Yeah.
so I'm pretty sure every single thing that's got Bion's blood in it is going to develop it. I have the one from the Hong Kong import that has developed it. The one from Canada through Urban Reptile.
Yeah, that's linked to the Eastern. So,
Yeah, so they need to be outcrossed for sure. So now that's kind of where I was gonna go this year. Was I was gonna pair the hets to northerns. I was gonna hopefully be able to try and pick out visually which ones are likely hets and which ones aren't, and then pair her. But I didn't get any of the Eastern stuff down cool enough to show any interest in breeding. And I'm struggling with that. The albino male, he just does not seem to want to figure it out. In 2023, I got him to lock 2 times to what I was told is a het albino female that I have.
okay.
Nothing came of it, and then this year, none of it was going, just because I may have fixed my northerns where they're in a much better situation, but in the process, keeping the easterns in the same environment kind of killed the breeding potential with them. But I've got plans next year to set things up and dedicate a separate space, really get them colder, try and put more focus on it.
So, are you going to cool some northerns with them in the other space, or try to coordinate them together?
Probably a smarter idea. I hadn't thought about that, but now that you've said that, I am. I will definitely pick out a couple that I can dedicate to that, because that's honestly the best takeaway from this podcast for me.
I mean, you know, if you got an extra,
my mind, but that's I will now for sure.
Well, because it's kind of hard to coordinate the two together. Like, so I have
I'm hoping that if I get the Easterns cool enough, that maybe the technique that James showed me with the not warming them up but using the heat, I'm blanking, the heat bulb, like the basking spot, might work at the Easterns too. To kind of time them, like with the males, to kind of get them going. But at the same time, if I'm getting them cooler, I'm also gonna want to make sure that I stick the Easterns to a T to like the coldest window, because we don't get that cold here in LA. Like, you get a couple, like maybe 1 or 2 nights out of the year that drop below 40. That's it. So That's the other thing I think with the Easterns is I really have to be on point with starting their cooling is when the weather in the area is getting cold, whereas the Northerns have been able to sometimes start it like right after Thanksgiving, sometimes a little bit before. Like they've been more forgiving
Yeah.
to not doing it perfectly with our winter cycle. I feel like in addition to getting them colder, I probably should make sure that they're like right on the money with our seasons.
Well, and you might not even have to get them to, the 40s, even 50 or 55 might be enough. I,
Well, yeah, so I've never, I say that because I've never gotten anything that low. It's just when we have 40. So like when I was first doing this, I had built a shed that was like almost the size of the guest house that I was living in. I was living in a little guest house and I had built like a shed that wasn't insulated that was housing everything for a while. So it always stayed warmer in there than the coldest it got outside. But I utilized the natural weather to be like what cooled it and heated it. And I had an AC in there in case there was that odd hot day during winter just to keep it from waking them up.
yeah.
But now I've got a little bit more control, but I still can use, rather than pumping AC and drying crap out of the room, can focus on like cracking open the garage door on cold nights to bring in cold air to help get it down to that temp. So it helps to utilize the right times. But
So are you planning to move them into the garage then?
so I have everything right now. All my breeders are in the garage. I'm gonna move the Easterns into a separate spot. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm gonna do it, but yeah, no, all of my skinks are all out. It's like a detached garage. They're all there, and I have like a separate room that I added onto it so that I can now move younger stuff to the separate room and keep them on full heat without being in the same room. Because I was keeping them on heat, but in the same room that I let get cool. So like they just hasn't really been that scientific. I've just been kind of shuffling. I think I grew too fast, too quick for sure, and didn't have things planned out all that great till this last year. And even then, didn't have it. Just kind of accidentally stumbled into what seemed to be a good situation for Northerns. But now I think I've got it figured out on what works. I'm trying to figure out how to make sure that I can control and kind of guarantee that I give them that same kind of cooling that worked.
One thing I was going to mention what you could do. So, and you wouldn't have to do it exactly the same way for the blotch. We have a 4-inch fan that basically brings in cold air from the outside. We drill a hole and put a dryer vent basically, and it set the fan up to a thermostat and it brings the cold air in. You could do something like that if you own your house and you're cool with putting a hole in it in the wall.
That could definitely work. I honestly thought about just rolling my racks that have Easterns into. I have like a gazebo outside, and I thought about because they'll be sheltered from like wind and weather and animals, but they'll just hit the natural elements. I thought about just keeping them with no heat under that and let them warm up to the 60-degree days that we get during winter and cool down to the high 40s at night, and essentially just keep them safe from predators outdoors.
I think it'd be worth trying.
So that's one of two things, either that or finding a way to move them. It's either that or move them into my guest bedroom and do something like you're saying, find a way to seal off that room where it doesn't get the same climate control as the rest of the house, blow cold air in from the outside, or bring in a little like window AC unit that's kind of jimmy rigged to not turn off when it hits 62.
They have, I think it's called a cool bot that you could hook up to the AC.
I think I've seen those. Yeah, somebody was showing. There was a video someone was doing. I stumbled upon like a year ago, where they were building 4 skinks.
That was probably a R&B reptile when they were keeping Easterns. But I don't know if they have any of theirs left.
Something like that would definitely work, but I'm kind of leaning towards just the outdoors because we don't get cold enough where I'm worried that I'm gonna go too far and kill them. But it would be the easiest way to really get them as cold as the environment allows them.
Now, are they not knowing exactly where you live? Are they well protected from non-animals coming in and taking them? Like people trying to steal them? Just something to keep in mind. Getting
Yeah,
up.
they're pretty well protected, or I could set something up to fail safe against that. But I mean, at the end of the day, if someone really wanted to break in here, like it's not especially if I'm not home, like if someone knew what they were doing, like they can swoop some of the animals from because I got chameleons all throughout my yard. Like I usually, even the people that I trust, I don't generally, unless I really know them well, don't invite people over just because I have so much stuff outside.
Right, good thing. The smart thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's definitely a potential concern. I would hope my dog would do something, but probably not. It's an English bulldog. But he barks, and no one can see into the yard. It's got pretty high fences, so they don't know what kind of dog it is, except for if somebody is watching this. And
what they have out.
I've got security systems, but I do think that it is a concern to a certain degree that if somebody knew what they were doing and just was going for 1 or 2 animals, a quick in and out, it is a concern of mine. It is not that secure.
So your company's a business, right? LLC or something. So what you could do, and it would be a business expense. It's about 10 grand. They have it. It's a dog with a flamethrower on it, and you could seriously buy it, and you could put that up. Just a thought, Then you wouldn't have to worry about anyone coming.
You say a dog with a flamethrower?
Yeah. Here, I'll pull it up 1 sec.
This is a real thing?
Yeah, it's a robot dog that you can buy. Yeah, Terminator, the flamethrower dog. Here, 1 sec.
Definitely not opposed to finding good business expenses to spend money on. But I do I'm saving up big time for solar.
So yeah, solar would be nice, but 9,400.
That's
free U.S. shipping.
That might be worth it. Honestly,
and it's legal. You get it shipped to your house. I don't think California's got any laws against it.
I don't think they've thought to. But, gotta get it first before they change things. No, yeah. But honestly, it's like one of my biggest concerns in LA right now is our laws on theft and on like nonviolent crimes they're pretty ridiculously loose, and they're not charging anybody for stuff. So it's like all on our own when it comes to keeping our animals and keeping our valuables safe, because it's one thing like if it gets to grand theft and you can prove the value because it's something that's commonplace, but LAPD is not going to trust me that a lizard is worth several $1,000s.
Well, if you got your
no.
receipts, you could prove it. Be like, hey, this lizard's 10 grand. I paid 10 grand for it. Here's the proof. That puts it up to a felony. Then they would. So that's something to keep in mind. But
you're right, though. It's just being more mindful and just really focused on trying to avoid it rather than what to do if it happens. It's the best way to go. But yeah, there's some stuff that just sucks about being in California. I guess the only thing we got the weather on our side.
Yeah. But now, I know at one point you were talking about moving. Is that
my career right now is too tied to Hollywood. I'm in the tourism and entertainment business. I manage the Hollywood Wax Museum, so I juggle doing that. It's like I don't know if you're familiar. It's like a really big. It's been around since like 1965. They do wax sculpts that are like almost like really, really good replicas of movie stars and music artists.
Yeah.
So that's it's a family business that I'm slowly learning and taking over. And maybe one of these days when we have like a branch in another area, I don't want to dabble with it, but I'm like too rooted here. But also that is as much as I want to be full time with the lizards, if I in a perfect world. The other thing that really kicks my ass is trying to find time for all of these animals and still working full time. But I also, it's like kind of going back and forth on it. Like I would like to just focus on animals, but at the same time, I don't want to be dependent on them. I feel like I've seen a lot of people, not saying everybody, but I've seen a lot of people, like you, I'm sure you're doing a great job keeping ethics, but I know there are quite a few people that got into it for the right reasons, and just because they couldn't make things work certain years, have cut corners with ethics because they've put all their baskets into like an animal business. So I've personally like to try and just keep it, even though it's gotten really big, and it is a business at this point. It's no longer a hobby. I've tried to keep a balance with it not being like my primary gig.
Well, and I think that's that's smart thinking. From a tax perspective, you wanted a business, that way you can get all the benefits from it, but you don't have to make it huge where you're as big as Nerd, for example, and have 6,000 square foot place.
Part of me wants to, but then the other part of me brings me back. Well, actually, it's more my girlfriend reminds me. She kind of reels me back in a bit.
Well, it's hard, you see that, but you got more to worry about too. Once you get bigger, you'll have to hire people. You couldn't do that all yourself.
That's totally true.
And you can find the right people, but I don't know how expensive help is around there either. I know California's kind of expensive overall.
I don't think that's one thing. I don't think I could employ somebody. I don't know if there will ever be a point where it would be big enough to employ somebody and be able to stay in California. Like I'd have to be working with much higher margins on animals and on like the whole business side of things because it's pricey. I mean, our minimum wage is going up. It's going to be over $20 by 2025.
Oh, wow.
Time, the benefits requirements, basically, and all the payroll taxes, you're looking at more like costing you over $30 an hour to have someone, and that's the bare bones minimum. That's finding somebody that's passionate enough to want to do this and only get paid the same as they could anywhere else.
And I'm sure you probably could, but yeah, that would be hard. How does California expect people to other small businesses that have whether it's their restaurant or whatever
Well, yeah, it's tough. I mean, everything's difficult. Prices have gone up. I mean, I'm sure they've gone up everywhere, but prices on stuff in LA have just shot up exponentially. I mean, I can't get a haircut. I haven't cut my hair in a year because I can't get a haircut for less than $60
Oh wow.
anywhere around. I mean, I can go get like a buzz cut from a barber for like a lot less, but like any like everything's more expensive. The rent to have the space, them to hire people underneath them at a barber shop, like it's just it's wild. Um, I don't know what a McDonald's uh, Big Mac costs in other states, but it's like $7 here or more just for the burger, not for the meal.
That I know that's at least a dollar more than
Yeah,
here. It might be even.
that's everything, I'm sure. So I mean, like going to the grocery store and getting like just produce, whether it's for me or for the animals, for gut loading bugs, for different things, for blending into my dog food slop mixes I do for the skinks. It's all of that. Anything that's not like purchased online that's a set even price, yeah, we see it all across the board. And then there's the tax rates. I don't want to get into that. Luckily, I don't make very much money off of the lizards because I find a way to reinvest it into more animals.
Well, and a high percentage of that goes right back into it in general from, we'll call it overall maintenance and care and food and substrate and
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Like people, like that's one of the biggest things is like especially when I'm selling some of the animals that I've had where it's like classics or stuff that you've seen on Morph Market when I have like a $250 skink or a $200 skink. I'm like, if you get like nickel and diamond, it's like I'm not making very much money off of this. This is like the price that it's like for me to give this animal and its parents a good, healthy life, so that you're getting a quality animal. It's like a break even for me to just keep things running. Uh,
um, that's the hard part. You can diversify to an extent, but end of the day, you don't want to sacrifice your ethics to lower your cost. I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, my biggest thing is I'm like if I save up. I feel like for me, the biggest thing is if I can get to a point where I can get solar out here, uh, that would be the game changer.
Yeah.
Uh, Once I get to that point, electricity is my by far my largest like. Well, actually, not by far. No, it's not by far. Okay, so electricity is about half. Food is the other biggest cost. I mean, not including my time, but electricity is huge. So getting that down would definitely make everything make more sense from a business standpoint, and potentially give the opportunity to like offer animals to people that are at a rate that's more affordable to people.
How far out would you say you are on saving up for solar, hypothetically?
Well, hopefully in the next year or two, some of these higher quality like systems are also a little bit cheaper. So I'm hoping within 2 years. But I inherited a house with a very very old roof. Well, I didn't inherit. I knew it going into it, but it was like part of what gave me a good deal when I got this place. But it's not just solar. I gotta get a full new roof first, or both at the same time.
You could. It sucks because you could probably get it cheaper overall if you did them both at the same time, but then you need more up front.
It's just a bigger chunk up front, yeah. So we'll get there though.
Yeah. What might be beneficial at some point. They keep doing random credits, I guess you'd call it, for solar. So, maybe in a year or two they'll have a killer credit when time comes, and maybe you'll be able to save 10 grand on top. Or
Yeah, they do. I mean, they do all sorts of stuff. I'm like hoping that when the time is all lined up for me, there's some sort of deal with like the battery storage, because that's the big thing. California had a bunch of deals where you could, like, if you get into a program, you can sell back the excess that you make to your the energy provider at retail rates, which means that if you produced more electricity during the day, then when you're using it at night, even if you didn't have like battery storage, you'd be able to offset your night usage by what you sold back to them.
yeah.
And then they changed it. Now it's like you can only get wholesale value, so you have to sell it to them at wholesale. But if you have to buy it back, you have to pay the retail rates. And then in like 2 years, they're gonna have that phased out if you haven't already gotten your panels and implemented it. So by the time I'm gonna be ready for it, I'm gonna have to focus on having battery storage so that I get coverage during cloudy days and during nighttime usage. So hopefully, because they are trying to push towards that, because they want people to be not like utilizing the grid in California altogether. So hopefully that'll be the next step, and I'll get lucky and it'll be lined up with some sort of rebate / break that's helping push people to batteries.
Well, and yeah, because overall California's grid's kind of crappy when they want to switch to electric vehicles. Anyway, they're having issues, aren't they?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that the electric. I'm not too sure, honestly.
Okay.
The electric car situation is interesting, to say the least, because they're pushing for everyone to have them. If there's not a lot of logic to it. There's a lot of problems and flaws that they haven't thought of or care to consider.
Yeah, they need to plan better. But sort of to switch back over to the reptiles, are you planning on adding any new species or new genetic skinks?
I think there's like a possibility, maybe, of adding some skinks down the road. Right now, I think I'm just trying to like recoup some of these big investments that I've made and be able to have like a little bit of a surplus, whether it be to go that solar route or for the next stages. But if I was to get into a different species in the future, one other thing that I would be very interested in working with are arboreal snakes, green tree pythons, potentially tree boas, except for the, I think it's the Amazon basins are way too expensive, but maybe one day.
Well, even the northerns, those are pretty, and more people are captive breeding those.
That's true too. But yeah, potentially that is potentially next. But I think I want to get. I think it's maybe maybe grab a couple of them because they take so many years to. You're talking like 4 years plus for girls to get them to the right size to safely breed them. So I might grab. I have one as a pet. I might expand just with a couple, 1 or 2 animals in that direction in the short term, with the intent to potentially work on a breeding project in the future. But for the time being, it's more just dialing in. The next couple of years is just really getting a system in place for skinks and for chameleons. It's like trying to get a lot of stuff automated on the chameleon side of things. I'm slowly moving towards getting every cage bioactive. So and getting everything set up where everything is like automatic with this watering, with misting and things like that, so that the only thing I have to do with them is toss food in, and and make sure there's water reservoirs that are full. When I get to a point with them where that's all I do, like from a care and requirement perspective, and then I want to really fine tune and make sure that I'm doing what I think is everything I can to optimize my breeding window for blue tongues. So if I get those two things done in the next couple of years, then there's a good possibility that I'll go crazy with the green trees and with the tree stuff, and just buy up everything like I've done in past years with the different species I've been working with.
If I had more room, like I've contemplated putting something next to the garage or attaching it to it and then doing like either green trees or some of the tree monitors. But yeah, I'm
Tree
sad.
monitors are also something that very much interests me. But one of the things that kind of has me going to the snake side of things down the road is if I start getting into the green tree pythons, Amazon tree boas, once I get that going and get a little bit more automation with their humidity and that side, since they only eat once a week, I'm like planning over the next couple of years. I'm still gonna keep chameleons, but I'm planning on slowly getting that the quantity down to focus on like just some very very specific projects, some of the rare stuff, because I want to get it down to where I can like start to teach a friend like to like have a system where like someone could come in and take care of things for me for like a week, because right now I can't travel. I want to go to other places. I want to go to Madagascar. I want to see all this stuff in the wild. I want to go to Australia, network with people. And at the moment, the way I have everything set up is I have to personally be here to manage everything, even for like more than 2 3 days tops. So that's kind of on the horizon in the next couple of years. I want to have everything wherever I'm at. I want to have things set up where it's simplified enough where someone else could come in and do a week's worth of maintenance, and I'm not like shitting bricks that something's gonna go wrong.
I think that's smart, and it'll make your life easier, and then it'll help. You won't get burned out either.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've had to deal with, the ups and downs. Honestly, like I mean, I feel like everyone probably has this. Earlier this month, I was at a moment where I was like, I'm gonna just sell everything. I'm gonna sell every single thing I have. I'm done. I came in a seemingly totally healthy female, like straight up looked like she exploded. She had 15 developing babies. It was my first magma girl from James Finn, and it was just like a devastating loss. And I was already getting all tired from all that work that breeding and getting ready for babies and having babies has been, and it was just cut pretty deep. And yeah, it's definitely something that's real. Is it takes a lot out of people reading stuff, and on the level that we do, the amount of energy we put into, because it's not just keep an animal alive. It's doing everything we can to make sure that they are thriving and making sure we're not missing anything. If we don't miss feeding just because we're sick or want to go do something, I don't miss anything. Like every single day is animals first. Like they eat first, I eat second.
Well, and that's what's gonna end of the day help you be successful though too.
No, 100%. But it is easy sometimes when things aren't going the right way to just to feel the fire kind of starting to like waver a little bit. But at the end of the day, take a deep breath, kind of recuperate. Anytime something bad happens, or in a realizing though that if I look at myself 20 years down the road, I'm can't imagine myself ever in a position not to be working with animals, not to be working with reptiles. So when you do have those moments, you just got to figure out, okay, how do we work through this? How do we get better? How do we recharge the batteries?
So for people listening then that might get to that same point, how do they overcome that or, prevent those thoughts?
Well, I guess for one, they're kind of make it or break it moments sometimes. You really should, if you do get to that point, the first time it happens, you really should. I think people should define how important animals are to them, how important like being able to raise babies and be a part of this are, because there's no magic wand where you're not going to get burned out from having 4 hours of sleep every single night for a month because you're trying to breed a bunch of animals during the small little window you've got, or things of that nature. So once you've kind of experienced it, you really got to identify, is this what you want, or do you need to scale back from where you are? Because the answer is going to be different for every person.
Well, and I think also, like you mentioned, like the growth, you don't want to grow too quick also. That will help,
That definitely would help too, is really mapping out and planning things. If you want to start a business, or if you want to start breeding for a business, or keeping beyond just like the pet level, it definitely makes sense to identify your goals and have a plan before you just start going out and getting animals. Because I definitely, when I started getting into skinks, I had a little bit of money to play around with from a lot of chameleons, things going well with chameleons at the time. And like I flew out to see Ray Gerge and meet him in person. And I just picked out 30 animals. I was like, all right, I'll go find, can you hold these for 2 or 3 weeks? I got to go get caging figured out. Like that was kind of started it for me. And I just picked what I liked, what I saw at the time. Like, oh, this would be good, but it was a mistake. I mean, like I still kept a lot of those animals. They're great. They've been useful, but like it was not the way to go about something like this. I guess at the time I didn't really think of it as a business though. It was like a hobbyist going overboard.
well, you get excited,
Yeah.
and,
But
what, out of curiosity, what year was that you flew out there?
oh crap, that's a good question. Was it 2017? I think it was 2017. But
So, out of what you kept, what was useful? Like, just what you got didn't really go towards a breeding plan, or
it just didn't enhance any plans that I had. It was like like a lot of the stuff was just picking out some of his hypo sunset stuff, some of his Turner White stuff, a couple of the red, orange, amber lion animals. I think this is the first year he was releasing those. Might have been the second year. I could be wrong with that.
I
But
got some the following year, or potentially the following year, or maybe that was 2 years.
but
1 or 2 years after you did.
it was just like it was like a smorgasbord of everything, but I didn't have a plan on what to breed to what, or what was gonna, or what I was my end game was. So when I first started producing stuff, it was just kind of whatever I got to pair, and I spent the first few years just selling every single animal I produced and not building on anything. Like I did not keep holdbacks on so many pairings because it wasn't something that I kind of wanted to pursue. And I feel like that's more of an important factor to me than producing animals to sell, is producing animals to collect. Like I now I'm a lot of the things I'm focused on are so that I can pick back and keep the top one or two animals of each pairing to elevate my program for future years. I feel like I spent the first couple of years just making stuff and then finding it homes, making stuff, finding it homes, and didn't have a desire personally to keep the outcomes in my collection. And that would have been, I could have skipped that and started, because like this, I guess this year is the first year. I mean, I've been doing this. This is the first year that I'm really producing any animals where it's like I can say that parents are mine. Like I produced the parents. Like this is not just like I took two people's animals or I took someone else's animal and made something of their creations. It's like I took creations of mine and made it because just the last couple of seasons I finally was in a place to pair stuff that I had a vision for.
Well, and that definitely helps, elevate what you produce overall too. Oh, sorry. And, kind of being your own best customer in a way.
Yeah, it's also a problem though, because I struggle to pick holdbacks.
Yeah.
And I mean, I held back last year. Like I didn't sell a whole lot of stuff as babies, and I'm still have a bunch of 2023 animals that I don't need because I kept at least 100 till they were over 6 months to help determine what I wanted to keep.
Yeah.
And it's just like I learned this year. I'm like, all right, I've already at birth marked about for a lot of like the red and orange stuff or any of the high color stuff that I've produced. At birth, I kind of identified half of them that I think are going to be something cool. And I'm going to try and, unless something crazy pops out in the first two sheds from something I didn't pick, I'm going to try and identify 25% from after the two shed mark and really try and not hoard animals for 6 months. And you know what? If someone else, if one of my customers gets a killer deal on something that turns out insane, I need to realize that that's probably better in the long run than me keeping them all.
Yeah. What I do, and this is just an idea. On some, like I'll pick, we'll say 25% after the third shed to hold back, and then after the fifth shed or whatever, I slim down that number from 4 to whatever, to fine tune it. And some of it depends on your room situation, how much you can hold back, where we're kind of getting more limited and got to be selective to what we pick.
Yeah, on that, I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm at the point where it's like I might have to give up an adult. Like I've kept almost not everything. I've kept like 90% plus of anything that I've raised up to be a breeder. Like still here. If I've already think I've produced the best I can from pairing, I have tried to find something else to make it useful. Or I've like another thing I've started to do is I'm giving girls like rotating them, so I'm not trying to breed everything every year. But I'm reaching that point where I probably have to start letting go breeder animals to keep to for the space for new younger stuff.
Well, and that's not a bad thing. We do some each year, and you label it like how they did, honestly, tell them, this one produced 10 babies or, whatever each year. And, it, it could still set up the next generation of breeders, to.
No, 100%. I I know there's nothing wrong with it. It's great that I'm in a position where I'm producing animals to give me that opportunity to move on from stuff. I just think it's an attachment issue,
Okay.
a little bit to a lot of them. Um, I don't know. Once I've had something for a couple of years, I really just like. I feel like it should just spend its life here. Like, especially because I've had bought early on a lot of adults, and it took years for so many of the animals that I bought at an adult level to get them to cycle on my schedule and in my area. Some of them still have it, and I don't know. It's tough from like a standpoint of selling them to somebody, especially if they have aspirations of breeding, trying to help them and let them and be confident that they're going to be able to have success with an animal.
Do you know for sure? And I don't ask that implying anything bad on any other breeders, that everyone you got was a quality breeder?
No, I don't know for sure, but
Okay.
I know that pretty much everything that I bought that came out of Florida, regardless of who it came from, if it wasn't a hatchling from that year or a newborn from that year, took me at least 2 years before I was able to even get it to do anything.
I did notice the yearlings I got from Florida coming to I'm in Minnesota, so it's a lot colder winters and stuff. They did take another season to get on this schedule.
But yeah, I mean, I was just in also in like such a rush. I felt like to be like, I want to get these animals and I want to like take a stab at breeding them, which is another mistake. Not only buying a ton of animals, but just feeling like I wanted an opportunity to breed them with like the following season from deciding I wanted to breed them. That was another mistake I feel like I made. So I feel like just the biggest thing is just telling people it's like, regardless of if you get an adult or a baby, you should be buying an adult because not so much that you could breed it quicker, but because you're it's proven. You know what it's capable of doing, and you know that at this point, chances are it's color. Like this is what you are gonna get. It's not a guessing game. Not so much. It's a fast track, quick way to get to the next step. I feel like if you take that approach, then definitely nothing wrong as long as it's from somebody that you know that took proper care of it. So like,
Yeah, because I know, like, there's uh, a new breeder in a northern state, like northeast area, like Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and he's got some. And first year he was successful with them, and coming from north to north, they were adjusted successfully quick. I guess be the best way. So some for I guess others to keep in mind, if they live in a southern state, maybe getting one from a southern state or planning ahead that it might take another year to cycle.
yeah, no, that's a good point too. If it's something from somewhere close to you, I would imagine it would be easier. And then also, I would say that if on top of that, if you are getting an older animal from someone closer to you, and then you take their advice on how to go through the process of like cycling them, chances are, if you listen to the person that you got it from and you're in the same area, you probably skip that.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I think it, if you do it slightly, you're close. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. That most likely they would. hop on track.
Yeah, but I do think that also just depending on where you are, I, that's another thing. I know everyone's found different tips and tricks that like elevating that slowly help get their progress and like their success rate up. So as we slowly try and work our way to matching those in Australia. But I really think part of it too is like something that works for you in your area based on the climate you have might not work. Certain tweaks and changes you do might not work for someone in Florida or someone in California for whatever reason. But I know that when I was trying to do everything that like early on, Ray was my go-to guy, and I was trying to just follow what he does to a T. Did not have very much success. As soon as I started like picking James Fenn's brain, being much closer to me, and just following what he's doing, all of a sudden everything starts working. And I don't think it's because anything that Ray said was wrong. I think it just worked for Florida.
Yeah, and there's definitely multiple ways to do it that you still get the same end result of getting babies. Um, Out of curiosity, have you been at a lot of expos in California or not really needed to?
I've never sold that one. Partially because like, and I've never really been all too close with anybody else that was vending, so piggybacking on a vendor was difficult. Also, it just didn't have a business setup, and if you want to get your own table, like it's all pretty legitimate. Like you have to have tax ID and be able to charge sales tax in the state. So it was never an option for me before the last year, and tried to do this last reptile super show, and they sold out of booths. But no, I've never vended. I go to the super show in Anaheim and Pomona. I try to go every year just to see people I know, meet new people. Usually as a customer, I always usually end up coming back with something that I had no plans of getting, but ends up working out.
Well, it's good to support the your local or fellow breeders too.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, some of the gems in my blue tongue collection are just from showing up to those shows and finding stuff that's been made with people that we know's like high quality lines, but them just plopping them together and just being a small little nobody that has a pair of blue tongues. Like there's this one that I got. It's just like absolutely fire red, and it's just somebody that got a pair from James a while back, and he's just friends with the guy that had a booth. He's there with like 10 lizards, and I'm like, what is that one? It's just so yeah, and they're just fun. I mean, like not everything's about business side of things, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just fun to be part of the community with them. I would really like in the next year to then for the first time. I think it would be a lot of fun. Not necessarily out of necessity, but more just out of getting the experience from the other side.
Well, and it could help get your name out there too.
That's definitely true too. Thank God for Morph Market though. I really think being on that platform, especially being up there as one of the earlier people on the platform with skinks, has really helped because I was like pretty much a no name even when I was like working with chameleons for many years. Like I just never got into a position to like be known at all really. And a lot of local sales, some fun and classified stuff, but it's really helped get things going. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done for name recognition down the road for sure.
Well, and that's the nice thing that it's around for us that kind of helps everyone be successful to a point is Morph Market that Otherwise, yeah, everyone would have to do expos, Craigslist,
Mm-hmm.
Fauna, or where now at least everyone kind of knows where to go. It guides everyone to one spot.
Definitely. No, it's a great platform. But even though I'm doing a pretty good job just selling on there, yeah, I would love to do expos. I mean, and I'd be lying if I was saying this last year was tough. I don't know if it was for you or if you've heard from other people, but in my mind, like up until this last year, it was kind of like just if I priced things right, if I posted up, it was gone really quick. And I think just the economy is just really hitting people hard.
Yeah, I think that's the big key. Everything definitely took longer. People didn't have the extra money that they used to, that they, had to put in their gas tank or for food, so they couldn't get new animals. But it does seem overall the economy is starting to go better.
I mean, based on the last month over here, things have looked on the up and up for sure. And I mean, just in general, it does seem to be gearing in the right direction. Hopefully, we can keep that momentum going.
Yeah. So going forward, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years. I think I'm still gonna be here in this same space doing the same thing. But I mean, hopefully, where I'm at with my projects by 5 years from now, hopefully, I'm dabbling with green tree pythons. Hopefully, I've kind of established some of these rare locale lines of chameleons that I'm working with right now. And I think a major goal by 5 years from now would be to at least have two gene het animals in the blue tongue world. Whether that be getting the albino paired to something, whether they're getting the hyper paired, some combo of those things. Because I have so much ivory stuff going on, I just want to try and plug it in with both those genes.
Yeah.
Give me at least a het. Give me at least a double het in 5 years.
It'd be nice if you can get some double visuals too.
I mean, that's a goal. That's 100% a goal. I just don't know if I 100% see it in 5 years, given the lack of success I've had with two of those genes, having them for the better part of 5 years.
Yeah, that definitely makes it, harder, where, you might be more optimistic or more
I
realistic.
I am in a lot better of a situation right now where I am able to finally build my surroundings to fit my animals rather than trying to just figure out the best way to make whatever situation I'm in at the time work. So that that could make a lot of difference going forward.
Yeah, I would think, overall ease of life, overall success would go up, and maybe even more enjoyment. Not saying you don't enjoy it now, but
Yeah, no, I as soon as I do enjoy it, but yeah, when the time comes, once I get a little bit more things automated and have things a little bit more streamlined, I think things will be great because like I one thing that I don't get to do enough of anymore is I miss just having animals out and just like spending a good portion of the time just interacting with individuals rather than it's kind of that's my girlfriend's part of the business at this point is she handles and socializes everything while I clean cages.
well, at least she's helping. That's a
No,
benefit.
100%. I don't think I know for a fact I wouldn't be able to do this without her. Even though she gets nothing out of it, she just does it to spend time with me and to be helpful.
Yeah.
If I do find a way to get an employee, she's the first one that I got to employ.
or
But
at least take her out to dinner or something for all her help.
100%, all the time. No,
Well,
but she's been a major help in getting me to where I'm at.
well, and I think that's very smart. You gave her some credit. Not we all got we can't do this all alone. Sometimes we got people behind us giving us hands and making everything go forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than that too. It's also like doing 2/3 of housework, making dinner more often than me, helping make the skinks food. She does a little bit of everything to free up so that I have the time to do everything that I do. So it's I don't want to undersell it. It's huge having her around.
Well, it sounds like she'll definitely need to be the first employee when time comes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wanted to thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was nice actually being able to talk to you, get to know a little more. Um,
Yeah.
where's the best place for people to reach out to you if they want to get some ivories?
Cold-blooded connoisseurs on Instagram's good, or just finding any of my ads on Morph Market. Either one of those, I'm very responsive. You'll hear from me the same day, probably within an hour or two, maybe sooner.
Unless it's in the middle of the night.
But
Gotta
yeah,
sleep.
I,
That's it.
I get like 6 hours of sleep, so if it's from like 10 to 4 a.m., you're out of luck.
All right. Well, thanks again. You have a great rest of your
All right.
night.
Yeah. And if you ever want to do this again,